Okay, come on in, Bill. Esther chapter 5 today. A little review, and I want to review by way of the word, the Hebrew word. Sometimes we miss things in our English translations, which, being perfectly fine, miss some of the redundancies that happen in this case, Hebrew text. And the word is all over the place in Esther. I'm not going to tell you all the times the word shows up, but just a few pertinent ones here today. This will serve to review our story just a bit. In the beginning of Esther chapter 1, Ahasuerus, Xerxes, is having a great and extravagant banquet, and he sends word to Vashti, and his word to Vashti is what? What is it? Come to my party, right? Really be an object at which we might gawk at my party of drunken men, right? So kind of my party. And what is Vashti's word back to the king? No way. Then the concern among all the king's horses and all the king's men is that the word of Vashti will become known throughout the empire, and all the women are going to rebel. That is the concern they have in their less than sober-minded thinking on that occasion. And so a new word or decree goes out, which basically says Vashti will be put in her place, and you women better put it in line. That's the word that goes out so far. Then at the beginning of chapter 2, King Xerxes is mopey. He begins to remember what he has done to Vashti in his drunken state. And he's a little bit sad. Apparently, according to Daniel and Esther, you can't change these laws. And so he's stuck. But his advisors once again come up with a great plan. How about you sleep with all the beautiful women in the kingdom, king, and pick a new one to be your king? And suddenly the word pleases the king, and he goes on with this sort of thing. So the word is a big deal. Let me see, Esther 2:22 was the next one I was going to talk about. Word. Oh, yes. There's a plot, a plot against the king's life, and Mordecai literally knew the word. He found out about the word against the king, and so he reports the word against the king. So word all the way on through. Last week's chapter 4. So remember, the king has promoted Haman, even though Mordecai was the one that saved the king's life. Haman says, everybody's got to bow down to me and pay honor to me, and the king says, sounds like a good decree to me. Mordecai would not worship Haman. Haman is very angry and wants to wipe out all of Mordecai's people. And Mordecai and the people outside of the palace, the Jewish people who are aware of this, are of course very sad. Inside the palace, though, they appear to be clueless. And last week was chapter 4, the sequence of Mordecai filling Esther in on what had happened, and Esther sending word back. And so actually that's what happens. The word of the king is Esther 4:3, the word of the king to go out and take out the Jews on this particular date, which is yet to come. And then the Hathach, the eunuch, verse 9, brings the word of Mordecai to Esther. And then verse 12, the eunuch gets to bring the word of Esther back to Mordecai. And they're doing this back and forth thing. The word goes back and forth. And there's this sense in which Esther did not know at the start of chapter 4 what was going on. Esther didn't understand. She just got the idea that her cousin was mourning. So sends her some new clothes, because you can't come into the king's palace compound if you're not wearing nice clothes. And apparently it's not about the clothes. He rejects the clothes. So we have this back and forth. Mordecai fills Esther in on what she does not know, though she's in the palace, and says, just because you're the queen doesn't mean you're going to escape. And she says, yeah, but if I go see the king, I can get in big trouble. And then he says, hey, such a time as this, that's why you're here. And then Esther says, okay, everybody fast and for 3 days for me before I go in. God was not mentioned in chapter 4. Neither was faith, but it was certainly implied, wasn't it? It's all over the place here. Mordecai has some kind of belief in divine providence, because he says to Esther, if you say no to intervening with the king right now, you and your father's family will perish, but deliverance will come from someplace else. Meaning, of course, that God will raise up someone. And then Esther says, okay, but have all the Jews everywhere fast for me, meaning intercede, pray, we need God's intervention, we're going to do this. For whatever reason, the author still does not explicitly mention God, but we who've read the rest of the Old Testament know exactly what the theology is behind this. That's your review with a word on the word word. Any questions or comments about the first 4 chapters? Which we did in only 6 sessions, really. An intro plus 6 sections on that. Well, how about Esther 5 verses 1 and 2? Don't want to go too far here. Deborah has this. Esther 5 verses 1 and 2.
On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Now remember, Esther's plan at the bidding of Mordecai is to go and see the king of her own initiative. What's the problem with that plan? What's the risk with that plan? You're supposed to be invited. And if you go before the king uninvited, what can happen to you? That's exactly right. Everybody at the same time does this, right? Because the king has men with axes right there. As I said to you last week, if you ever really need to get something done, you need 2 guards at your door with axes, and people will leave you alone, Anyway, that's what happened in the king's realm. So her neck is literally on the line here. She's going to go see the king. So what we have is a very careful description of how she approaches wisely. The third day, where have we seen the third day before in Esther? She's coming on the third day of what? Yeah, they're fasting for her. They're fasting on her behalf. So this is the third day. The days of fasting are coming to an end. And now she is going in. She puts on her royal robes. Literally, she puts on royalty. She is putting on her royal outward garb because that's what she is. She is the queen. And by the way, this is the first point in Esther where she's actually called queen in our passage a couple times today. So she puts on royalty. Inwardly, she's been fasting and mourning. Outwardly, she's putting on her royal robe. So there's kind of a contrast here what's going on for Esther. Inwardly grieving and sorrowful. Outwardly, this royal splendor and dignity. My understanding is purple, gold, and white may have been the colors there. I don't know. I wasn't there in the court of Susa, but that's what people say. So I don't know how they figured that out. But anyway, perhaps purple, gold, and white there. So if you really want to impress somebody, especially if they got axes out ready to chop somebody's head off, you want to go with the purple apparently here. Anyway, Liz likes purple. She stands in the inner court of the palace. Now, I don't fully understand the diagram of the palace at Susa, but what I understand is the inner court will be just outside of what we call the king's hall, and in the king's hall would be the king's throne. So she is standing not in the room she's not supposed to be in yet, but in a place where she can be seen from that room. The king's hall we have seen before, 1:9. Somebody go back to 1:9, Esther 1:9. Same term in Hebrew. In 1:9, tell me what was happening in Esther 1 verse 9. The banquet for the women was held in, at that point my translation is royal palace, but it's the same term, king's hall. So you get the idea that the men were outside in the gardens, and the king had very nice gardens, and the women were in the hall having their part of the banquet in Vashti's days. Now the king is back on his throne in his hall, and Esther is standing in the inner court, and inside the hall, sitting on his throne, is the king facing the entrance. We're having this set up very particularly for us, who is standing where and who is looking where, because what happens at the beginning of 5 verse 2? Chapter 5 verse 2, what happens? The king sees her. See how she's done here? She's very intelligent. She has put herself in a position to be seen by the king before she actually enters into the danger zone, if you will. He sees her. He sees Queen Esther. That's how he sees her. Queen Esther. He sees her in her royal status. Keep in mind, he hasn't even called her into his bedchamber in 30 days. So it's not like they're buddy-buddy here, okay? So he sees the queen, and how does he respond? The scepter, because he is what? Text says he's pleased with her. And we have this legacy of Esther being pleasing to people and gaining their favor. Let's go back and track that down a bit. Esther chapter 2. Esther chapter 2. Esther chapter 2, who is going to please whom in Esther chapter 2, verse 4? This is the proposal. So I'm going to read 2, verse 4 of Esther. Who would like that? Esther 2, 4. All right, Todd.
And let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti.
There we go. So the plan was the girl who pleases the king will be queen. And then Esther 2, verse 9. Esther 2, verse 9. This is Esther now in the court, the harem, with reference to Haggai. Bill has this one.
The girl pleased him and won his favor.
There we go. So Esther has pleased Haggai, who's the man in charge of the women. What a prestigious title and role that is in the Persian Empire. And then Esther 2, verse 15. Somebody read that.
Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come, go and sue the king. She required nothing from Haggai, the king's chamber, and keep her the women appointed, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them of her father.
There we go. So if you're keeping track of the people that Esther is winning favor in the eyes of, it was Haggai, the keeper of the women, and now it's in favor of apparently everybody who's involved in her journey into the palace to go in and see the king. And verse 17 of chapter 2. Who would like that one? John, thank you.
Now, king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti.
There we go. So Esther has now won favor and approval in the eyes of the king. He literally loved her more than other women, but this isn't like the love you actually want someone to love you with. This is, he was pleased with her physically speaking. And so all of this favor winning that Esther has done, she has won favor, gained favor, found favor in the eyes of basically everyone she's come in contact with. And so here we are in chapter 5, verse 2, and she has taken a great risk to appear where she has, but the king has seen her first, which is exactly what she was hoping would happen, and he was pleased with her, and so extends the golden scepter, and she touches it, which is the appropriate gesture to acknowledge that I have been graciously received here. Questions at this point? Comments?
I wonder how much he really, how much they versed or
Yeah.
she was there at his pleasure.
Right. You do wonder that, don't you? How much have they conversed? What kind of relationship do they have? Apparently, it's "I'll call you next month," right? It's not a real close relationship relationally. He was obviously really excited about it early on, but that's been about 5 years now, I think, by my count. That process of her becoming queen was, I think, the 7th year of Ahasuerus, Xerxes, and now we're in the 12th year. Most recently, the last comment we got was the 12th year, and so time has passed, and apparently the heart has not grown fonder. But maybe absence makes the heart grow fonder. 30 days away, and he sees her in her stunning royal robes, and so he is apparently excited to see her today. We always like it when the king's in a good mood. That makes for a better chapter. So the king, less heads roll. That's true. Fewer heads definitely roll when the king is happy. So anyway. All right, verses 3 through 5. How about that? I think Aline was first. Aline gets it. Esther chapter 5, verses 3 through 5.
Then the king said to her, "What is troubling you, Queen Esther, and what is your request? Up to half the kingdom it shall be given to you." Esther said, "If it pleases the king, may the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, so that we may do as Esther desires." So the king and Haman came to the banquet which Esther had prepared.
Oh my goodness, we've got all kinds of banquets in Esther, don't we? Banquet number 1 was what? Our first banquet in Esther was what? Anybody remember? Oh, yeah. So Vashti got the axe. Actually, there were kind of two banquets going at the same time there, right? There was the banquet for the men and the banquet for the women, and Vashti gets called for the banquet of the women to the banquet of the men, and it all went downhill from there for Vashti. What other banqueting have we had so far here in the book of Esther? Remember? Other banquets. The king and Haman, yeah, they were, after the king issued the decree that the Jews were going to get this day of violence against them, the king and Haman sat down for a drink. What better way to celebrate an impending genocide than to have a drink together? And then, pretty horrible, isn't it? But in between there, after Esther replaced Vashti, we had a banquet in honor of the new queen, Esther. So we've had lots and lots of banquets here. So Esther is very, very smart. First thing she's going to do is put herself in position to be seen by the king, but not actually be in the axe room, if you will. And then the next thing she does is, how about a banquet, right? You know, because the king loves food, drink, sounds good, right? That's all he does. So this is how he operates. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Verse 3, Delene's translation is insightful. What's troubling you, Queen Esther? Literally, what is it? But we understand the tone of this. What is it that's a matter? Because you have obviously taken a great risk to appear before me. He understands that something big is happening, or she wouldn't have done what she did. And what is his offer to her? Verse 3. Up to half the kingdom. Now, Xerxes Ahasuerus has not exactly been a beacon of discretion in this book so far, right? We would agree that he has a tendency to be just a little bit lavish and extravagant and out there, and going along with things without particularly thinking too much. You know, the suggestion about replacing Vashti, and then the decree from Haman. Really, Haman says, hey, let's make it a law they have to bow down to me. Sounds good, right? Let's make it a law we're going to kill all the Jews. Sounds good. I mean, this guy does not have a lot of discretion. Although it's possible at this point that up to half the kingdom is just a way of speaking. I think, I didn't check this morning, I could be wrong. I think when Herod Antipas has his, I guess, wife's daughter dance for him, that he makes an offer of up to half the kingdom, and it turns out to be a whole head of John the Baptist rather than half the kingdom. So it may just be possibly a way of speaking. It's also possibly another evidence of the fact that Xerxes sometimes speaks without thinking about the ramifications about what he has offered. So what's the matter? Up to half the kingdom, it'll be yours. How does Esther respond? 5:4 again. 5:4 again. Who wants to read that? Sandy, thank you.
If it pleases the king, replied Esther, let the king together with Haman come today to a banquet I prepared.
Okay, if it pleases the king. So the emphasis is on the king's pleasure, which is how everything happens in ancient Persia, according to the book of Esther. If it happened, it was the king's pleasure. If it wasn't the king's pleasure, it didn't happen. And we've already kind of seen that theme developing here in the book. So she's yielding and acknowledging this is a matter of your favor, your pleasure. Let the king together with Haman come today. My understanding is that the Hebrew text is ordered in such a way that Esther's very careful here not to make it appear as though the king and Haman are on par, but that Haman is kind of the afterthought guest. Nevertheless, Haman is invited. Why would Esther want Haman to be present at this banquet with the king? Why would Esther want Haman to be present? And there are lots of great ideas on this, so you could join in. Yes?
I think it's a setup, basically. She's setting up the situation such that when she makes the accusation later, he is there
Yeah.
to be accused of what has happened.
Okay. She's setting him up. He's going to be there to be accused in person. Also, if you're Haman and you get invited to dine privately with the king and queen, how are you feeling about yourself? I moved to another notch. And there weren't a whole lot of notches for Haman to move up in Haman's own estimation of Haman. As far as Haman was concerned, Haman was pretty great. And now I'm even greater. You know, this guy is all about me. and he is invited to audience with the king. So in addition, as Bill is saying, to the logistical setup, there's also kind of the interpersonal setup. The last thing that Haman is going to expect now is that he is going to be, executed in some sense. I mean, he's saying, hey, this is great. The king loves me. The queen loves me. Everybody loves me. Anyway, go ahead. Yes.
Well, maybe in another study, we talked about how there's a possibility that maybe like arousing the king's suspicion a little bit here. Like, why is Esther inviting this guy to dine with us? Like, already maybe setting the stage for some, maybe not anything right away, but just
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of maybe even jealousy potentially. Or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that.
Why is the queen inviting Haman, and how is the king receiving that invitation? What is the king thinking about Haman? Some of the suggestions and scholars was that she's asking in such a way as to not make him jealous. So perhaps the king is assuming that the queen wants something to be done for Haman. We just don't know. What is his thought process here about Haman? We don't know. It may also be communicating the nature of the meal. If she invited him to a private banquet, he might expect something afterward that she doesn't intend to give. So this is not going to be a romantic evening. This is going to be something else that she has in mind, that king and Haman both going to be there. Notice the banquet is not, I will prepare, but I have prepared. How can you say no, king? There's this great meal down the hall. She knows the way to his brain is his stomach. And so she's like, I've got this ready to go if it pleases you, and bring Haman. And how does the king respond? Verse 5. Yeah, bring Haman right now. I'm hungry. It doesn't say I'm hungry. That we may do literally the word of Esther. We may do the word of Esther. So this whole book has been concerned with word and with law, and the word of the king, the decree of the king, this sort of thing. Now, let's do the word of Esther. So remember, chapter 1, it was Vashti's word that the king and his men were really concerned was going to leak out and cause a rebellion among all the women empire-wide. They must not know the word of Vashti, or not without understanding that she didn't get away with it. But now, let us do the word of Queen Esther. So we've had a flipping here. The king wanting the empire to not know about Vashti's word, or to know it was not approved of. And now let's go quickly and let's do the word of Esther. So things have flipped here. Yes, Sandy.
Back to why he invited
Yes.
with, 57 things of the reason.
Right.
That has no backbone.
Right.
She gets a promise from the king without being heard by him, and the king just talks out of it.
There you go. Yes, good. I'm glad you brought that up. So Sandy is saying if she brings the king in without Haman being there, Haman might talk the king out of it later on. We know the king has met with his advisors to make every other decision he's been making. And so having the king and Haman present at the same time is going to be important for the conversation. So she is probably, in fact, trying to control the response. So all these levels going on. By having Haman present, he's going to be there physically for the accusation. He's going to be buttered up. She's communicating to the king something about the nature of this gathering, and she's going to make sure on the one hand she has witnesses, and the other hand, this is not going to allow wishy-washy king to go back out and be talked out of whatever by his advisors. So yes, it is that angle as well. I'm glad you brought that up. Yes. Any other observations about this invitation to come and gather the king and Haman for a banquet?
I'm glad I didn't work in the kitchen.
Glad it didn't work in the kitchen. Yeah. I don't know, job security at the kitchen, maybe. As long as the king liked what you made, I think you'd be in pretty good shape.
Must have had 24/7 people.
Yeah, 24/7 banquet. They're always eating in the Persian Empire. And the king's extravagance. Again and again. Keep in mind the contrast. What are Esther's maids and eunuchs? What are Esther's people, the Jews, doing at this time? They're fasting. And we're going to have this banquet for the king. The way to the hearts of the people and interceding before God, that has to do with fasting. The way to the heart of the king has to do with food. And so we've got this contrast going on as well. Getting the attention of Yahweh, the God of Israel, is a matter of fasting and prayer. Getting the attention of Ahasuerus, the king of Persia, is a matter of feasting.
Where the old saying, the way the man hard is for his
Yeah, the weight of his heart and his brain and his law is all through his stomach. You're right, the whole thing. This guy is a stomach-driven individual, hormone-driven individual for sure. So bring Haman at once so we can do the word of Esther. And the king and Haman go to the banquet Esther has prepared. And let's read verses 6 through 8. How about that? Who wants verses 6 through 8? Steve on the second row, please.
As they were drinking wine, you only start like the king and Haman went to the banquet. Esther was 6.
Go for it.
As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, "Now, what is your petition? Will be given to you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom will be granted. It will be granted." Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this: if the king regards me with favor, as it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet, and I will prepare for you. Then I will prepare for you. Then I will answer these questions."
Okay, thank you, Steve. Beginning of verse 6, what are they doing? Yeah, they're drinking wine. Esther's already won, hasn't she? She's got him right where she wants him. He's drunk, you know? And this is when Xerxes makes all of his important empire-wide decisions, is when he's drinking. You know, so she's got him right where she is smart, right? Every level here. She appears before the king, but without actually appearing before the king, so that he actually ends up calling her in that sense. And then she throws out the idea of this banquet. He loves food, and now she's got him drinking. He loves to drink. So everything is going swimmingly well at this point. Her plan is genius so far. And while they're drinking, the king pops the question again. And what does he promise again? Half the kingdom. Yeah, what's your petition? What's your request? Up to half the kingdom, it will be granted to you. So once again, he is being extravagantly generous to her. Maybe it's a formality, but he is indicating again intent to respond in her favor. And she could have asked for the head of Haman. So this raises a great question, right? Because instead of coming right to the request that we wanted to ask, right? We, the readers, are nervous. We know the lives of the Jews are on the line here. Everything has gone so well, and we were already a little bit surprised when she did the banquet thing. Just ask him now. But, okay, all right, banquet, get him drunk, that's okay. But now, instead of making her actual request, her request is what? Come for another banquet. Now, we know the king loves to eat and drink, but we, the readers, are like, don't press your luck. I mean, he's already been drinking. He's in a good mood. What do you want? Half the kingdom? Go ahead right now. Now, there are some who say, well, this is just the narrator's way of having fun telling the story, because 3 times is a lot more fun than 2 times. But it's also possible that it's a quite deliberate thing, the way that she phrases this. So she says what? Her petition and request is verse 8. Someone read verse 8 in its fullness. Yes. Okay, so this is great. She is twice emphasizing it's about your favor and your pleasure, King. It's about my petition, my request. So she is positioning herself to make sure that she still wants him to know this is a matter of you having favor, you having pleasure. It's my petition, it's my request. Let the king, if it pleases you to grant me, notice that? If it pleases you to say yes, then come. Your coming will be an indication of your intent to say yes. So she's kind of flipped everything here on the king, and his coming to banquet number 2 will be his indicator of his intentions to answer a request from banquet number 1. So she is actually very subtly, with the language of granting and favor, actually put the king at her disposal, and literally, then I will do the king's word. You had the more embellished translation. I'll explain it about, but literally, I will do the king's word. In other words, she is now positioned the entire thing of, I will obey you tomorrow when you come back to my feast as a sign that you intend to do what I am asking you. So she has totally gotten the king in her way of thinking here, very subtly. And the king loves food, and the king loves wine, and so of course the king is going to come. Impressions about Esther's uninvited encounter with the king.
I wonder how much,
She's a controller. She's got him control now. Yes.
I wonder how much, Mordecai had been advising her.
Yes. How much of this wisdom came from Mordecai and how to handle this? How much of this wisdom came from 5 years of hanging out in the king's palace and understanding how the king operates? Bill has an understanding of how the king operates. You know, the stomach is the key, right? But she obviously understands the protocol, and she's thought this through. Of course, we would believe theologically, right? Who has been fasting on her behalf? All of these Jews throughout the empire, and her non-Jewish, apparently, assistants that tend to her in the court of the women. And so all kinds of people have been interceding on her behalf. So she has been given wisdom. Tiffany's been listening to the VBS songs. It's one of the blessings of VBS, actually, that when VBS is over, the VBS songs continue to play in the stereo of your car throughout the year. You know, it's a great thing. Anyway, one of the songs, though, is about the verse from James. If you lack wisdom, ask God, and he'll give it to you generously. And Esther will be another example of that. Subtly, but it's there. Yeah. Where did she learn her tactics? That's a good question. Yes.
She was tight with a couple of eunuchs too, wasn't she?
Yes,
You're
yes,
in
yes. She's definitely tight. There's this network within the palace, apparently, that Mordecai is a part of, and Esther's a part of, and a number of the queens and maids are a part of, that are connected and trust each other and have some connection. So it's quite possible that when her circle found out what she was going to do, that they began to advise her, here's how you need to go about this. So yeah, it invites us to speculate. How did this plan come together? Because this is a good one. Yes, yes. She is cagey, yes.
You have to recognize that these people that have been in service for a number of years know exactly what it takes to make the king happy,
Yeah.
to push the king forward and things, because obviously he has people that's doing that because he doesn't make up his mind on the film a lot of times. So he has people. So these people that are around him, eunuchs and everything, know what it takes to maneuver him.
Right.
And they are all very taken by Esther because of her humility and the other things that she's demonstrated to them. So they're more than
Yeah.
willing to help her. And they probably don't like Haman much anyway.
Right. I think we're invited to see all three of those layers. We're invited to see the first layer that you mentioned, which is that if these people are still alive and have a job working for the king, it's because they know how to keep the king happy. If they didn't know how to keep the king happy, these people in the palace wouldn't be alive and wouldn't have a job. So Esther then has good connections with them. That's already been whispered throughout the story. Esther and Mordecai and these kinds of people are connected very well. Obviously, Hatach, or however you say his name, is well connected to both sides of that relationship. And what was the third thing you said there, Bill, at the end? I lost my brain.
Well, they probably with Haman with
Oh, yeah.
they
They,
probably don't really like
they might not like Haman, yeah. It's a good chance. I mean, Haman is not, if you want to win friends and influence people, the best way to go about it isn't to make a law that says you have to bow down to me and worship me. And it's not going to make you, it might have people bowing down, but it won't have people liking you. It's like Bob the Tomato sitting and standing. Outwardly, I might be sitting, but inwardly I'm standing. So anyway, all of that going on. Other questions or impressions about, yes, Liz?
Well, one thing that strikes me, first of all, one is she doesn't speak it. Like right when Mordecai tells her about this, she's like, okay, you guys all pray for 3 days, and then the third day she's going. So
Yeah.
even though there's whatever, almost a year or something that they have, I just think that really speaks to her courage, her boldness. Like she's not like, okay, well, let's pray about this for a few months, and then maybe I'll go in later, or maybe things will die
Okay,
down.
that's a good point.
Addressing it right away.
So Liz is saying, this is supposed to be 11 months are supposed to elapse between the decree going out and the day in which people can annihilate the Jews and take their stuff. Yeah, so she doesn't put it off for 11 months. She's doing this earlier in the time. Keep in mind, the edict went out on what day? Anybody remember? When did the edict go out? The night before Passover. And the purpose of Passover is to remember that God delivered his people when it looked impossible from the most powerful man on the face of the earth. And so now we've had this 3 days of fasting, so we are early in that feast, I guess. We're in that Passover range still, and she is going promptly, almost like while Passover is still in our minds. You should have a time of feasting around Passover. You should have a time of celebration, but the people have been fasting. So it's almost like she wants to maximize that spiritual energy, if you will, of the fast. Like we're going to go right now on day 3, while the people are really, really feeling it physically and really into it as far as interceding for me. Just a thought on the time. Yes, go for it.
So it seems like she kind of has this plan, like whether the Geyser, what Mordecai has, whether she came up with one somehow, or it seems like she goes in planning, obviously, she has the food already prepared, so she has the first banquet prepared, so in my mind, she has the whole plan laid out.
She goes in planning for the second banquet from the very start. I think probably so.
I wonder if maybe she didn't, like, well, first of all, she didn't know if she would even live, but if he did grant her the gold scepter, maybe she thought he would sort of do it in a, well, I should probably lose some my queen kind of a way, and so all the rest of this helped butter him up more. But it seems like she got him on a good day, like, he was really pleased with her just when he saw her, and it makes me wonder, I wonder if he would have been in the position where he would have been willing to grant her request the first time.
She got him on a good day, yeah.
She was kind of planning as if maybe he would be kind of hesitant about it, or maybe even offended.
Okay, so you're speculating that this whole plan of an encounter and then 2 feasts may have been a buttering up plan, that when she gets in there and recognizes how favorably he's receiving her, she could have just popped the question then, but I don't know.
Maybe she thought he would be more offended that she had come uninvited or whatever, so she's doing this to really, really make him happy.
Make sure that he's really happy. And then also, if having the banquet had all the advantages it had the first time, would it not have those advantages again the second time? As far as buttering up Haman, Haman thinks he's really in favor of 2 banquets with the king and queen privately. I really must be great now. And having him physically present for the accusation, and having him physically present so there can be no misunderstanding. I mean, all those advantages would be doubled down by having a second banquet as well.
His opinion is going to be, I'm angry and you're dead.
Right.
Or I'm offended, but I'm not going to kill my queen.
Right.
You know, and I wonder if she really thought it was going to be one of those 2 tracks that was going to happen, not like, oh, hey, I mean, he does seem to be pretty happy all throughout this. So she
Yeah, the king is happy all the way throughout.
planning, thinking.
You know, this makes us, of course, we're speculating here, but the text invites us to speculate. The text invites us to speculate by not giving us all the rationale and things. But, you know, we have talked about how well connected Esther is with the staff at the palace, apparently. I mean, she's got some people that are in her corner. You know, you just kind of wonder who all had said, hey, yeah, the king's having a good day. Or you wonder what other preliminary stuff may have happened to make sure the king was in a good mood. I mean, if she knows there are people, I mean, what else is happening? We just don't know. It invites us to speculate. But what did she anticipate? Well, your question really is, what did she anticipate that the king was going to say? Is it off with your head right away? Is it, I'll reluctantly accept you? I mean, was this better than expected? Did she just not expect that fight favorable reply? Why is she drawing it out like this? Some have suggested that the reason she draws it out twice is because she loses her nerve. She recognizes what a big deal this is, and okay, I gotta wait again. And maybe that's in there too, I don't know. But it does seem as though the plan is calculated and has some advantages if she draws it out for a second banquet. Other comments or questions on these encounters with the king? The other thing I was thinking when Liz was talking is, there's been a couple times now we've gone on a family vacation, and we've gone to eat at some restaurant we've never been there before, and we liked it so well we went back a second time before vacation was done. That's happened twice now, you know. So maybe she really has doctored the menu here to the king's liking, and he's not going to be able to say no to more of the same. So
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
go for it.
There's a note in my Bible that says, no subtle reason need be sought for the first and second banquet, nor for Haman's being the only guest. These are but literary embellishments needful to the story.
Okay, yeah, so that's one view, is that he's just telling the story in a fun way and stretching it out. which is possible, but it's also possible there's a deliberate intentionality to the sequence here. So there's, like I said, there's two different schools of thought in Esther, basically speaking, and the scholars I'm reading about half and half. One is this is historical fiction, like they've written a story that fits an era but didn't actually happen. The other era is that this is based on a true story, which, like a lot of movies that we love that are based on a true story, have deliberately been, built up a bit for the purpose of highlighting what actually happened, the significance of it. Doesn't make them disingenuous at all. I tend to be in that way of thinking on it, but yeah, that would be one way of approaching the text for sure. Yes, Sandy. Okay, yeah, so maybe the banquets give more time to get to know her and like her even better, right? Because he liked her really well at the first encounter and apparently early on. So maybe it's we get to have some. I mean, think about how many times you have to have a conversation with somebody you really don't want to have. I mean, just as a topic has to come up, I don't want to talk, I don't want to deal with. And so you want to work your way into that with some pleasantries and that kind of thing. So possibly that's part of the thing as well. And were you going to say something else? Yes. Segue, right? The gap between banquets allows Haman, who already has a very high view of Haman, to have an even higher view of Haman, right? So we're going to have that now. Let's read verses 9 through 14. Esther 5, verses 9 through 14. We're going to have to revisit this next week, but we'll at least begin it today. Bill has it. Esther 5, verses 9 through 14. What happens between the two banquets? Here's your answer.
Haman went out that day in a high spirit, happy and in high spirit. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear of his presence, he was filled with anger against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him and how he had elevated above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave. And she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, have a gallows built 75 feet high, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the dinner and be happy. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the gallows built.
Oh, we're just chuckling at Haman here now, aren't we? Haman went out happy and high spirit. Apparently it was like a matinee. It wasn't a nighttime banquet, apparently, because he's going out the same day. Yeah, something like this. Anyway, there's more time left to, when the king is in the mood to come to the banquet, we're going to have it right now. Here we go. So they had this banquet. There's more day yet to go. He goes out happy and high spirits. Why? Because he's been drinking wine. We've had this happen before. But what does he see that gives him great disdain? Yeah, Mordecai at the king's gate, and not doing the two things which have been demanded of all the people at the king's gate, which is you're supposed to bow down and pay homage to Haman. So he has reignited the same wrath as he had before. This is the whole reason that Haman doesn't like Mordecai. He wouldn't bow down to me and honor me before. And so now Haman is enraged at Mordecai again. Nevertheless, he restrained himself. Verse 10. Good for Haman. Haman restrained, So he calls together his friends and Zeresh, his wife. Once again, Haman is going to be like the king here. He doesn't make decisions on his own. He brings together all his advisors, so to speak. In this case, it's his wife and his friends, to tell him what to do. And then he has his boasting party, right? His vast wealth, his many sons, all the ways the king had honored him, how he'd elevated him above all the other people in the king's little empire there. And that's not all. What else is the feather in his cap?
I'm the only person invited to the party.
Yes, I was the only one invited to the party with the king and the queen. And not only did I get invited once, I got invited twice. So now we're seeing that maybe there's more than just a literary cleverness here. Maybe Esther actually had something to this plan. And remember, what did Mordecai tell Esther to keep a secret? That she was Jewish and that she was related to Mordecai. So Haman doesn't know this, and that's key. The underlings have figured this out, we think, because there's this connection between the word going back and forth between Mordecai and Esther all the time. But Haman is in the dark about the connection between Mordecai and Esther. If he was not in the dark about that connection, something like this little scheme might be harder to pull off. But because he is, he's like, the queen invited just me, and he's not connecting the dots because I'm the one that hates her cousin, right? So he's all excited about this. But even though everything is going right in his life, says Haman, there's one thing in life that is keeping me from being fully satisfied, and what is that? Mordecai is still sitting at the king's gate, meaning he has the position in the king's empire here, the king's gate, probably more than just the gate, but a place where many administrators would have worked. And Mordecai is probably there at this moment on this day, dressed how? In sackcloth, and probably wailing and all this stuff. So not only is he not bowing down to Haman, but he's wailing and dressed in sackcloth and all of this stuff. So not a real great situation here as far as Haman is concerned. One guy I can't stand. And why can't he stand him? Yeah, he won't bow down to me, right? It's all about me.
This sounds like a cartoon.
Sounds like a cartoon.
Why did you see Haman, he's walking, he's whistling, and everything.
Right, right.
He sees the, guy that won't.
As Haman is heading home from this banquet, he is busy thinking about all the things that make Haman so great and why Haman is so happy with Haman and all this other stuff. And then he comes along and he sees Mordecai, and the next thing you know, I can't get no satisfaction. Apparently that was written by Haman. Or maybe it's you can't always get what you want. One of those. Anyway, go ahead. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect. Yeah, Haman. So Haman wrote, "Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble, and you can't always get what you want, and I can't get no satisfaction." All those songs inspired by Haman, apparently. And but once again, right, we see our hearts in the heart of Haman. We see Haman's heart in our hearts, and his way of interacting with things we're humbled by, because sometimes, and this is obviously a caricature here, right? We're going over the top with Haman, but we understand our own tendency to be very focused on ourselves. Look at me. Look how everything's going for me. It must be all about me. I must be great, this sort of thing. And then that he's the one person who won't join in with the I'm great party. And here it is. So his wife and his friends have an idea. And what is the idea? Yeah, build a gallows. Now, as I said before, the word in Hebrew is just wood. And so the assumption for a long time was gallows. This has been translated differently in different eras in history, depending on the common method of execution at the time. What has been learned since then is in the Persian Empire, they liked impaling. So the Romans liked crosses, and the Persians liked impaling. Other empires have liked gallows, guillotines, these kind of things. But just literally, the wood is the term here, and we're assuming, based on the research, this is an impaling method. And the beauty of impaling is you make like a human shish kebab out of the person who's executed. So it's a public spectacle, which in that sense is like, it's like crucifixion. Not only did you kill them, but you're making a display. Right, yeah. So you're humiliating and making them look bad for sure. And do this, and the dimensions are egregious here, right? 75 feet high. That's gonna be a lot of effort to get this guy on top of this thing, right? But we're going over the top here deliberately to describe how sinister this is. And when are we going to kill Mordecai? In the morning, and then go back to your banquet and be happy and celebrate that not only do you have everything going in life except for one thing, but you have everything going in life exactly the way that you want it. By the way, when we live life like that, there's just this one thing. If I can just get this one thing to go my way, then I'll be happy. What happens when you get that one thing? You want something else, right? And that's why these songs we've mentioned are so popular, because when you're living for the flesh, you always want more of what the flesh wants, and you're never really satisfied. Psalm 37:4. This is a risk. Psalm 37:4. Oh, good, I was right. Psalm 37:4. Sometimes you dial the scripture wheel in your head, and you don't know where you're going to land. Psalm 37:4. What does this say? Who wants it? Deborah has it.
Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart.
There you go. Think about that. Just go home and meditate on that text. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. It does not mean, I want this thing over here. If I'll just delight myself in the Lord, he'll give me the thing I want, and then I'll be happy. It means make your delight the Lord, and you will be satisfied. Make your delight the Lord, and you will be satisfied, whether the thing comes about or not. He is inherently delighting. Haman is obviously portrayed in Esther as a godless man who has no regard for the God of Israel or his people, obviously. He wants to eliminate them. Delight yourself in the Lord, he'll give desires of your heart. Be content with what you have, Hebrews 13:5, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So true contentment, biblically we understand, has to do with my delight is in the Lord, and I am content because he is with me. And that's where contentment will be, regardless of whether you and I get the circumstance we want to change or whatever else. And a helpful sketch by way of contrast here with Haman. Haman, who is not satisfied with everything, he wants one thing more. And the suggestion is kill your enemy before breakfast. Yes.
This is beside the point, but, I mean, if they built the gallows 75 feet high back in that time, how did they get the person up there?
How do they get him up there? The scholars seem to think this is an exaggerated number to make it a really big gallows, just like everything else in Xerxes' empire. The feasts are super long. They got extra bunches of everything. So I think the dimensions may be tall tale dimensions here at that point for the purpose of dramatic effect. I don't know how they get him up there. That's a good. I have to do some research on ancient Persian execution. There you go. Yeah, build. Yeah, find a 74-foot tall thing and build a short. Right? I don't know. I'll do some looking on that ancient Persian execution. What are you doing for work next week? Research on ancient Persian execution methods. Right. But this shows us that as far as Haman is concerned, Esther has accomplished her goal. With feast number 1 and feast number 2 on the way, she has him exactly where she wants him, just like with the king. Everything she did put the king in position to say yes, and by getting the king to say yes to a second banquet, she has framed it in such a way that his agreeing to come to the second banquet is his agreeing to say yes to a request, and she's framed it in such a way for Haman to say, I got this exclusive audience with the king and queen, not once, not twice. I'm even greater than I thought I was. My only problem in life is my enemy Mordecai, who needs to be executed right now. I can't wait till when the dice said, the Purim said to cast him, to kill him. I got to kill him now. And so he is right where Esther wants him to be. But another interlude is going to come next week that's going to set things even more. Yes, Bob.
You know, we keep making the comment, you know, God isn't directly mentioned anywhere in Esther. So looking at it, is it really that Esther has both the king and Haman where God wants them?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
To know what the outcome of that first banquet is going to be that we just read.
Right.
But God would have known.
Sure.
So he's the one
Sure.
controlling.
I think
the whole
that's
scenario.
I think that's fair. I think certainly we, the biblical audience, see this as God positioning the king, God positioning Haman, God guiding Esther, Mordecai, the whole sequence. We see this as divine guidance. Leads us back again to the perplexing question: why does the author not come out and say this? You know, we're dealing with an English translation of the Hebrew manuscript. The Greek manuscripts embellished, added in sections to explain. Mordecai was praying, Esther was praying, the Lord was revealing. The Greek manuscripts feel a need to insert some of this theology that's only implied in the Hebrew text. So why was the original story devoid of extra explanation? Why is God's name not mentioned? And I think we're really left still wondering about that, because you and I are looking at this and saying, this is obvious. This is how God operates. Passover is in here. We're automatically thinking the God of Israel delivers his people in miraculous ways. So we're already invited to see that this is God at work. So why does he not come out and say it? I think it's a fascinating line of thinking, and we haven't necessarily come to one defining answer on that. Yes, Bill.
Maybe the writer wanted people to identify the only way that this could happen is God.
Yeah.
And so he didn't explicitly write it in there, but he wanted them to fill the information in their own mind.
Yeah, and sometimes authors do that, don't they? Sometimes authors write in such a way as to invite us to complete the picture and come to the right conclusion. And sometimes that makes for better literature, better movie, better whatever. Yes, Sandy.
It could be avoiding something.
Avoiding censorship. There you go. Yeah, they got to get this document to survive. It doesn't have the name of Yahweh mentioned. That's an interesting idea. Possibly so.
I think this is also a great lesson in the danger of egos and pride.
The danger of our egos. That's right.
And causes us to think about it
Mhm.
happened in our life.
Yeah, yeah,
Who will give
Yeah.
thanks to himself and all the hard work that he's put into it, or
yeah.
thanking God for it.
See, this is speaking right to John, right? I've been elected to the town council, you know. Look how great! And John's been thinking, if I can, right, John, yeah, moderator, town council, what more? And then he's thinking, the one thing, if I could just get rid of those potholes, then you know. So this is. It's like the pastor who said, you know, Lord, if he'd been here today, you really would have given it to him, you know, not here. But I think that's an important point that John's bringing for the whole book of Esther. Our ego and our anger are dangerous things. And we've seen the ego and the anger of the king and now of Mordecai, or not of Mordecai, but of Haman, be very dangerous things. And so part of the thing, you know, Sherry was talking about the language is almost cartoony a few places here, but part of the reason you build it up like that is it makes for a better mirror. Like, oh my goodness. You know, I mean, I haven't had the 75-foot spire made to execute my enemy, but maybe that's the direction I'm kind of going here, you know. And so, Lord, show us our hearts. So that's interlude number 1 between the two banquets. We're going to have interlude number 2, and the banquet that Haman walks into the second time will be very different than the banquet he walked into the first time, and it will become the last banquet he ever walked out of. So I guess we ended up finishing chapter 5. Isn't that unbelievable? 2 weeks in a row we've done a whole chapter. What is wrong with us? Anyway, the board, it was just like way beyond the board today. Anyway, so chapter 6 will be next week, and we will pick up with the second interlude, which will be significant to our plot development. I will pray, I will close, and then I think Todd has something I want to say after that. So let's pray. Lord, thank you for your word, and thank you for your spirit who speaks to us beyond the text itself. And I pray you'd show us our hearts. I pray that our hearts would be humble and confident like Esther's, and not like the heart of Haman or like the king. I pray for confidence in you. I pray for quickness to prayer. When we see something coming that's hard, you help us to be quick to pray as Esther and Mordecai and the people have been in this place. And I pray you'd help us to trust you. You are more than able to intricately work out the most complicated of things in ways that exceed our imagination. We give you glory for making a way when we think there's no way, and we've seen you do that again and again. Help us to have that humble trust in you and eager obedience, even when there's risk. And I pray you'd search our hearts and show us where we are in this story, to your glory, in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to say goodbye to the internet. We'll see you back here next Wednesday for chapter 6 of Esther.